Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. Today's guest is Steve Wright, the general manager of the Jay Peak Resort. He's here today just to kind of update us about what life is like at the resort. Welcome to the show.
Thanks
again,
Steve. Thank you, Scott. Thank you.
It's always great to have you on.
Good to be here.
A year ago, you weren't on here. When you came on, it was a totally different thing. It was following the huge crisis up there. But a year later, I think you're a pretty happy dude.
Yeah. In general, yeah, I definitely happier than we were last year at this time, and definitely some more security than there was last year at this time. About a year ago, the SEC had come in and taken control of the resort. And started in process, the court proceedings that are still going on with Ariel Quiros to this day. But we had a great season. A ton of snow made everybody look like they were geniuses.
Yeah.
We financially much better footing than honestly. Well, obviously better footing than we had been last year at this time, but really better financial footing than we've been at any point since I've been associated with the resort.
Yeah, that was really great for you to schedule that amazing winter to come at that time. No, that was your first winter as general manager, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So how did you manage to pull those strings to make such a winter?
I wish I knew, because I pulled the hell out of them again. I'll tell you that.
But it was you had a long winter too up there, didn't you?
Yeah, we had a fast start, a couple of feet of snow actually before we even opened. And the holidays came in well, which is always the best way to start a season, is to have plenty of terrain, plenty of snow for the Christmas and New Year's period. And then some well-timed storms throughout the year, and most importantly, no real rain events heading into the weekends. Every single Saturday we pretty much got what we call a win in terms of weather, so that helps.
The J, what most people know as the J Cloud.
Yeah.
Cooperated with you very well this year.
Hung around all year for us. It
Right.
did, yeah.
And you have not a brand new tram, but your tram got up and operate, and then I think it celebrated its. Did it celebrate its birthday last year?
Yeah, a year before it did. And what we did this year was upgrade the electrical system, upgrade the hangar system, the control room. And we're just down to the 5-yard line here with the upgrades as we sit and talk here this morning. We're hopeful that it'll be back in operation for the weekend of June 15th-ish. Just as we kick into wedding season, we'll have a tram that's twice as fast as it has been over the course of the last little bit, and people are going to notice the difference for sure. Maybe not in the summer, but by the time we get into winter, they'll definitely notice the speed difference.
I was talking to a fella who helped build it 50 some odd years ago, and his memories were amazing. Just the details that went into building it, and he was saying, like, the helicopter shots that I love so much of them hovering over the peak and dumping cement. He said that helicopter. He said that was just a show thing. He said that ended up being a total nightmare.
Yeah, that was just for the cameras, probably.
Yeah, well, but he just remembered the great detail, and all the work went into it, including the Native Americans from a reservation. He said it was in Canada. They did all the high wire work and everything. So
yeah, it's quite a. I mean, it's even today without any need to fly in cement or concrete. It's quite a project what we're doing right now. I mean, the electrical system is old, and trying to replace parts that end up failing is impossible because they just don't manufacture them anymore. So we had a real urgent need to upgrade the electronics as it relates to the tram, and then as it's a piece of equipment, new pieces of equipment and new tweaks to that system had become necessary, and we're excited to get it going again for sure.
Yeah, that's a big component of life at Jay, and there's been some thought even in the past if Jay hadn't built that tram, just when it did, maybe Jay wouldn't have progressed in its direction because it became part of its signature.
Yeah.
And part of its identity. So
yeah, it's really, you could definitely create that argument. We considered other options for getting folks up to, to that part of the mountain or just about that part of the mountain, but and some of them were financially doable. But the element of how that tram being a signature piece of the brand, that always kept coming back into the conversation and was a big part of why we decided to evolve that rather than replace it.
And you probably are aware that at one point before the tram, they actually had a chairlift that brought you up to the top.
Yeah.
That was way before. That was before my time.
Yeah, yeah.
So, so things are looking pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Like I said, the strongest financial winter that we've ever seen. Probably the third busiest winter in terms of skier visits, and in terms of occupancy in the hotels. The number one or number two to all time in terms of occupancy and the average daily rate, all that stuff that we measure, all up off the charts to the year before, which obviously was a pretty dismal season, but even against some of our stronger years like 13-14 and 14-15, against those seasons, which were records, this one outperformed that even. So. And
I know last summer, you had people who all were mortified. They had weddings planned, and then you had the Porsche parade. It was a huge gathering of Porsches. You had something like 1,000 Porsches up there.
Yeah.
But I know at the last minute they tried to even shift the event somewhere because they were afraid you weren't going to be open.
Yeah.
Then I just remember when I talked to them, and I spent time with them as their speaker, they could not believe in such a nightmarish situation that you were experiencing at that time, how well you pulled it off, and they said they can't even believe they'd been at the last minute trying to find another place. You probably don't have people scared anymore to host events.
Yeah, I mean, they're not scared to host events per se, but I think there's still some concern with people committing large blocks of time and money going down the road. There's some concern about what our operating status is going to be, but that concern is really diminished compared to what it was last year. That Porsche event that we pulled off, being able to trot that out as being emblematic of the staff's ability to deliver is huge. We continue to bring that up, and the fact that we delivered on more than 70 weddings last summer. Being able to show the world that has been very helpful in securing weddings for this summer, which this was really my big concern. I mean, last summer, these folks have committed their money, their weddings, their plans were all in the can, so to speak, so they weren't going to really cancel. My concern was a new crop of brides and grooms going to commit themselves to Jay Peak from that point forward. And they definitely did. We're right at the same number. We actually have more on the books financially for weddings this summer than we did even last summer, which was a record.
So what do? Do you guarantee those weddings are going to last forever or their money back?
Well, yeah. We guarantee the fact that we'll actually have somebody up there in a place that they can get married. After that, they're pretty much on their own. Pretty much on their own.
Now, you've had some really good news lately, though. You have some projects underway.
We have a few different things. We had the stateside cottage project that had been halted when the SEC came in. We had intended and had started construction of about 84 new stateside units, stateside condo units, and that is back underway. And we had good conversations with the receiver, Michael Goldberg, where we had asked him to reduce the number of condos that were originally intended to be in that phase, because frankly we don't need more condominiums at the mountain at this point. We took the money that we saved by reducing them and are going to put them into the creation of 2 synthetic recreation fields just below the resort in the town of Jay, that we are going to go after soccer camps, field hockey camps, lacrosse camps between sort of Memorial Day and Columbus Day, that time slug, where we're hoping to attract camps and tournaments of folks that will come into the region, stay with us, stay in the region, and travel around, sort of like we did with hockey, our hockey business. But we also had asked him through the process to take another building that was intended to be a retail cluster of condos and townhouses and let us turn that into employee housing, which, going forward, the attraction and retention of good, talented employees is something that, we're really going to be focused on, and employee housing, having that available, is going to be a big piece of that. So the fact that they allowed us to do that is fantastic. And then the third piece is our recreation center, which we had begun construction on that a few years ago as well. That halted, and that has been restarted this week. It's going to be a little more than $5 million dedicated to this, the building of this center. It's going to have climbing walls inside, about a dozen climbing walls, an indoor movie theater, and an arcade in there. So it's another piece that's designed to, attract visitors and get them feeling good that there are other things to do up here should the weather go sour on their vacation. So exciting for sure.
So why? Yeah, because the employee aspect is, some people probably disagree with me, but I believe that we're almost at 100% employment in this area. I know the statistics don't show it, but I believe that if you're not working, you either, for some reason you don't want to work. And I mean that, some people don't want to work, they're stay-at-home parents, but there's another group of people, when they hear work, they run. Mm-hmm. And I believe there are people who just simply do not want to work. Mm-hmm. So it must be really hard to get employees now.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is difficult when you aren't as competitive against other regional employers as you should be, right? We have, I feel that we have an obligation, given the size of the resort, to be the best employer in the region. We want to be the best employer in Vermont, and we're not there yet. And there are things that we can do to help get us along the way. Whether or not employment, people interested in employment are saturated, as you're suggesting, which may be the case. We need to be such a number one option that the best people in the area want to come and work for us. You know what I mean?
And you were telling me before the show that means you're going to improve your pay scale.
Yeah, we've done it this year. I mean, the first year of our receivership, we raised wages by several $100,000, and we plan on doing it again as we get into the next fiscal year, which we're into right now. It started May 1st. We're another $500,000 worth of increase in wages, and it's my goal, my personal goal, and my staff's goal, to get away from minimum wage altogether. 4 or 5 years ago, half of our seasonal jobs were minimum wage, and it's my hope that by the end of this coming year that we won't have any jobs at minimum wage, because frankly the market is too competitive for good talent, and we have got, along with employee housing and what we consider the best benefit package in the business, we have got to be able to compete on baseline wages and commission-based wages in a way that nobody else does, and that's our commitment, is to do that.
And I think and the cost of turnover, if you're not competitive, there's also a cost of the constant turnover of staff. And
absolutely.
So, but I will tell you, as you know, I spend some time at the mountain each month with my Northland Journal, distributing it, and that. I'll tell you, you got some of the happiest, they put on their smiley face at the beginning of the day, because I run into people and I can't, every once in a while I'm going through there and your workers say, "Hi, Scott," and I'm thinking, okay, who's that? But they seem to know me by name up there, and they all, I run into very, very what appear to be happy employees. And your business, let's be real, to be a frontline worker in your business is not always easy.
No.
You've got some pretty high standards to meet with your customers, and most of them are able to put that smile on their face, as far as I can see.
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously being in the service and hospitality business, it takes a special sort of employee to want to be in the trenches of delivering hospitality and delivering service, right? Because you may win 95% of the time, but the 5% that you lose can be difficult to manage. You get 5% of the customers up there and the guests up there who are pre-inclined to not enjoy themselves, and that can be a difficult crowd to manage. But I'll say that I think that, and I've been in the ski business for more than 25 years, and I think that the staff that we have up there is second to none now. I mean, these guys just came through a winter of being in receivership, which, to the viewers who watch this have, some notion of what that means. But until you're in the middle of that, and you're essentially a ski resort being run by the federal government, at a macro level, that it can be difficult terrain to navigate for an employee. They started out last April unsure of whether or not they were going to have jobs. So it's one thing to go to work every day and not knowing if you're going to be employed the next day, but to be able to be in that situation where you then have to go and swallow that fear and deliver great service is not an easy thing to do. And our crew really, really over-delivered on that service promise this year, even with having all that receivership BS.
There was also the fact that you had to be an employee with a business that was making the news in horrible ways, and just, and because there's the one thing I got a kick out of is these keyboard heroes, the people who get behind their keyboards and they seem to be able to solve the problems of the world.
Yeah.
And they, we all know what went on there. No matter what, things went wrong. But on the other hand, is we should still be hoping for the best.
Yeah, I mean, as a local, I would hope that. To connect to your point about the employee morale issue, you're right. I mean, these employees were reading these things in chat rooms with folks who, wanted to share their opinion, and reading newspapers every day with, trying to get information through the papers that's not always completely true and is oftentimes slanted in order to try to get impressions, which is why we put such an onus up at the mountain on making sure that the employees knew, from me to the extent that I knew, what was going on, so that we could manage that narrative for them, and so their sort of blood pressure didn't rise and fall just predicated on newspaper headlines, because you're right, that can definitely happen. And in the chat rooms, the sons and daughters of the keyboard who are out there just to be heard. I mean, part of me gets that. I mean, there are locals here who are concerned because Jay is such a driver of the economy. And people at some level felt a little bit betrayed by some of the stuff that happened up there. I get that. And I would say by and large, most of the locals, on order of 95%, even the ones that really felt kind of betrayed and slapped around a little bit with what happened up there, are still supportive of what we're doing. But it's the 5% that make all the noise that people end up paying attention to. So I think that, if anything, we've done a pretty good job of making sure that we put into context that the signal to noise ratio has largely been positive, right, and the 5%ers are just, you're not going to make them happy, so it's crazy to try.
Oh yeah, I know where you're coming from about the feeling of what happened, because I've been a big supporter of Jay, and Jay's been a big supporter of me. So when it all came down, it was like, it was like, once again, something really positive happened. It was like a kick to the gut, mm-hmm. And then it was like, okay, let's move forward. Yeah. As long as the investors are, taken care of, I think everybody agrees that's, mm-hmm. That's paramount, that they be cared for.
Yeah, and I think that they will be. Everything I've spoken with Michael about, his number one focus has been on trying to, get these investors their investments back, to the extent that he can, which is why there's been such an onus and such a focus on making sure that the business continues to survive and that the business continues to thrive, because to the extent that we're successful, there's a much stronger likelihood that they'll get a better multiple for the resort once it sells. And to the extent that we get a better multiple, the investors get closer to being made whole.
The wisest thing they did was keep you. I'll tell you why. Is not only do you know what you're doing, but you are a known commodity here.
Well, I'm known. I don't know about the commodity part.
You're, as far as I'm concerned, you're a straight talker. You're not prone to a lot of fluff, and maybe some people don't like it, but usually I can get a straight answer from you. Mm-hmm. And if you can't answer it, you either find it or you say, I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think, but you've been here for years. You've raised your kids here, and so I think that was a good thing, because if they had taken in somebody else, maybe they had vast knowledge that even surpasses yours. They wouldn't have the institutional knowledge, and they wouldn't have the knowledge of the community like you do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I communicate in a way that I respect being communicated too. I've been on the other side of these relationships a lot too. So yeah, I mean, I try to be as straight as I can with either the public or more importantly the employees who needed that straight talk this year for sure, because there were so many different perspectives going around on what was happening, and so many half truths and quarter truths, that it was important that they understand that I was going to be as straight as I could. And
you know what? It's one thing I appreciate about you too is you don't have just happy talk. Is your happy talk doesn't get you anyplace. What you've been on the show and you said, hey, right after the whole debacle there, you came on the show and you said this is going to be a hard slog, and it wasn't this happy talk. Oh no, everything's going fine.
Yeah, I think in general, I think I try to set the bar as low for myself as possible. It's easy to jump over when you do that.
Right.
But I think regardless of the fact that there's plenty to be excited about up there, there's still the reality, short term, that we're still in receivership, and that has implications to things. And I don't think it's fair to the employees or to the public to be able to suggest that it's going to be something different.
Right.
So I think and to the extent that we're honest with people, whether it's the public or our guests or the employees, to the extent we're honest to all those stakeholders, I think they give us more latitude. It's only when they feel like they're being shined on that they start to say, hold on a minute, this doesn't feel right. So we try to stay away from things that don't feel right.
So you've also become quite a music venue. You have, and then I understand that you're also going to bring some of that music to downtown Newport.
Well, it's not Jay Peak. It's if I can say their names, it's Andrea and Barrow from Belvedere,
right,
who had a great idea to bring live music down to Newport on Wednesdays, starting for about a 6-week stretch just after the 4th of July holiday this year, and they're going to be bringing in live music to the space just adjacent to the Belvedere down there, where they used to have the jazz festival down.
And the Belvedere is in this, what I still call as the new state building.
I was going to say that, but I forget I want to make sure that I get it right with you, because you're a historian.
Right.
I don't want to call it the wrong name.
But the Emory Hubbard State Office Building.
Thank you. Yes.
I'll probably still be calling it new until the day I die, just because I remember it being built.
Yeah, I've said that before too, and people always look at me funny. What do you mean it's new? But anyway, they had the great idea to bring live music down there on Wednesday nights. I think based on the success of what the jazz festival had over the first couple of years that they did that, and I had a great meeting with them and told them that we would support it 100%. I mean, not only do we love to support these musical events, because it's a big part of who we are as a company too. We do the same thing in Montgomery, where we support the Montgomery Sessions series. But when they came to me with the idea, both myself and my staff are excited to get behind it, both in our ability to help book bands, because we do so much of it up at the mountain, but also financially to try to get this thing up and running. I think it's going to happen between about 6 and 8 p.m. down on the water. It's a great place to see live music. Hopefully we can get a few other vendors involved, so it ends up being a little bit of an experience. But you and I were talking a little bit about the nature of events in and around the Newport area, and sometimes they don't get the traction that you sort of would hope because of a lack of support. And I think one of the things that is important to do with things like this, and it's based on our experience up at the mountain as well, is that you have to commit to them for more than just a single year. There are things that have to be relied upon by the crowds and by potential viewers. They want to know that this thing is going to continue to happen. So we're hopeful that we can get some financial support behind it to pull it off, and some audience-based support of people to come out, have an early dinner, and come out and listen to some music, or come out and have dinner at one of the restaurants in Newport, and then come down there and listen to some music afterwards.
Yeah, and I always put a plug in for my favorite restaurant.
What's that?
The Thai restaurant.
Yeah.
Actually, in reality, though, downtown Newport has its faults.
Yeah.
But it has some good places to eat. I think with Newport, though, it also has to. I was born and raised in Newport. I live in Derby. My heart, still a piece of me, is in Newport. So I've always had I've been the eternal optimist. But it's been shaken lately. I've seen too much politics in the city. I don't mean like national politics. I just mean there's too many people who seem to throw roadblocks in front of any good event, and they just I want to see them succeed. Like I look at what Cynthia Moore, who as we know, she passed away. She and her husband Gene McCormick did with the Jazz Fest. That was just phenomenal. These two people, basically the first year on their own, I think they tapped into something.
I agree. That
this area, because Newport is, we can talk about Newport of the days of old, and some of that's actually myth anyways. We're not going to return to that chapter, and it's never probably meant to be, but we can move on to a new chapter. And the waterfront music, look at what it does in Island Pond.
Yeah.
That little community rallies, was it one day a week, one day a month, or
every week.
Yeah, every week, and they attract people from Newport, Derby, and that I look at Island Pond, this forested little community that struggles too, as a community that's doing something right, that maybe Newport should emulate a little bit.
And I think part of the energy around doing this that Andrea and Barrow have caught on to is the fact that a community like Island Pond can be successful at this. And to Andrea and Barrow's credit, they don't have any hidden agenda here in doing this sort of thing. They're recognizing the fact that there have been a couple of good years with the Jazz Fest, that there is a great community here, a great business community here, and we should add some energy to it by the virtue of having live music, because I think that if there can be something like that and some energy down in that Main Street core where we start to drive people down there, then you get restaurants like Belvedere or Lago or Cider House or the Thai Place, these great restaurants on Main Street, and some new businesses that are coming down there. Maybe we start to raise the tide in terms of bodies in that area, and they start to explore Main Street a little bit, and then we start to build on that musical piece next year, and it becomes bigger, and there's more people. I mean, that's at a grassroots level. Those two, that's the kind of support that you need, and then the community, the officials, need to support that kind of energy as well, and they have to this point, to their credit. They see what needs to be done. So,
I think the music thing is a step right in the right direction, and not to make it too don't complicate it, just do it. And I think because Newport needs to focus on not only on what it doesn't have, but needs to focus more on what it does have. Absolutely. It has that lake.
Yeah.
It has the position, and that's how come. Especially, we're going to be celebrating. Newport will be celebrating its 100th year as an official designated city, which is the only city in the Northeast Kingdom, the only designated city, next year. So it's going to be a great time to make the leap into maybe a bit new, a bit different direction for Newport.
There's a lot of small pieces of energy that I think if they can come together over the next 12 months with a lot of this stuff, I think a lot of positive things can come from it. And I get what you're saying. I think it's tough to be an optimist in this in this world, not even in this community, but anywhere. But it doesn't take a lot of optimists to create a lot of success. So I think that if we just get sort of a controlled number of them, I think they can do a lot of good. And I can't say enough about Andrea and Barrow, who
I think
that's the type. That's what we need.
Now I'll have to get them on my show here
Right.
to talk about it, because
Absolutely.
I think that's a great thing.
Yeah.
Because there's too many people who talk about doing.
Yeah.
They talk,
Yeah.
but they just don't do. And those very same people sometimes will shoot down the ideas of everybody else. And
You're right. I mean, and that's when you find somebody like that, like them. There's an obligation that when you're a big asset like Jay Peak, that we get behind them and try to throw logs on the fire, so to speak. It's something that, I mean, it's selfishly, I want to be able to have a place I can come down and listen to live music on a Wednesday night, quite frankly, and go out to eat with my family and go down and listen to some music. But, we also feel an obligation, both personally because I live in this town and professionally because I'm at a resort that, needs to mend some fences with this town at some level. That we should be doing these sorts of things. We need to be a better partner of the community.
But and also is in this day and age, the way people vacation is a bit different. They very seldom now go to a place and stay there for a week. They'll go different places. But you probably get some people who stay there, and even though you offer so much at Jay Peak, you have the water park, you have golf. If they're like me, they like to wander. They like to find out what makes the area tick.
Absolutely.
And so Newport is only 20? You drive it every day.
20 minutes.
What is it? 20 miles?
20 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, and they want to explore, whether it's to like I tell my town, Derby, we take for granted that the border is. I have had, like, the Korean Broadcasting Network out of Washington, D.C. came up and interviewed me, and it wasn't for Jay Peak, it wasn't for some big thing. It was about those flower pots guarding the border at the Haskell.
Yeah.
Because in Korea, you have more than flower pots guarding the North Korean border.
Yeah.
And it's little things that we locals take for granted that a lot of people are interested in.
Absolutely. I mean, as it relates to the mountain, you're right. I mean, during the daytime, you've got people who are focused on things like golf and like water park, skiing, riding, soon to be the rec center and our soccer and lacrosse fields. But at nighttime, we're still relatively sleepy. You can eat a little bit, you can have a drink, and being able to have something like this at 6 o'clock midweek, to the extent that we have any midweek summer business, I can almost guarantee you that there'd be people interested in driving down for that. I know that you and I have talked about this before, the way that we travel. You like to get into the community and poke around a little bit. So
yeah, I know. I think one time we were even in I think a couple of years ago, we found ourselves in Las Vegas at the same time, because our travels take us wherever the airplane takes us.
I don't know what you're talking about. I've never been to Las Vegas.
Yeah. Actually, it's this is my opinion, the most overrated city. And then of course, I'm not a gambler.
Yeah. Well, I will happily plead the fifth on that one.
Well, I'll tell you, when I walk into a casino, and when they realize that I am willing to lose up to $25 before I call it a day, they treat me like a king.
Yeah.
In other words, no,
Yeah.
I'll gamble $25.
Yeah.
And if I lose that, I'm done.
All right, that's probably smart.
So, this is a painful subject that involves Jay Peak, but I'll bring it up since you're honest. Is when you look at that hole on Main Street, how do you feel as a member of the community and know that was a previous chapter of previous chapter of it?
I've probably, like a lot of people, there are mixed emotions on it, because I see it as a huge piece of potential for the area. Would I rather see that building standing there in the state of panic that it was in prior than looking at a hole with a fence around it? I guess I'm kind of neutral about that. I mean, the first thing that would have had to have happened with that building is it would have been needed to be completely knocked down. There was no chance whatsoever at rehabilitating the structure. So, the resort decision to take that down probably ended up saving some new developer over $1 million in terms of deconstruction costs that would have had to have happened. So there's that element to it too. And I've been in conversations at enough levels to know that there have been several people interested in the property with some very interesting and creative ideas for the space. And I know that there's a group in town that meets pretty regularly to brainstorm on some potential best uses for the space, and they'll likely be able to have a conversation with any new developer in there to express their interests. And so I think that for the most part, I look at it as a lot of potential. It's impossible not to have some sort of negative sentiment towards it. I think that's natural for anybody, including probably myself and you. But
no, I understand, because a lot of people talked about those as historic buildings. Well, if you've seen my photos, I actually done an evolution of that block. There's really wasn't old does not make things historic. Well, the corner one up on the corner of Second and Main. Mm-hmm. That could be argued that was historic, because that was once a beautiful building.
Yeah.
But most of those buildings, they were just old. Like, you and I are not becoming historic.
I'm not.
We are becoming old.
Yes.
And so those buildings, they had been retrofitted, they had been changed so much over the decades. Mm-hmm. They were not historic.
Yeah.
In saying that, I think you have to look at that area now. We can sit here and grumble
mm-hmm.
and complain about it, but we have to look at it as opportunity.
Yeah.
Because I'm really tired of looking at that fence.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I really do see it as an opportunity, because what choice do I have? To sit here and grumble about it?
Well, it's a tangible representation of what happened.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's something that people can point to and put a face to exactly what happened. But I think it's important to underline the fact that space is $1 million cheaper because of the fact that the buildings aren't there anymore.
Right.
And ultimately, that will play into making, once all the entanglements become unentangled with respect to the courts, it will make the process of selling that piece a heck of a lot easier.
And I think one thing people need to remember, including, and I know you've done a great job at this yourself, so with Jay and with Newport in this area, we need to be careful of the image we are creating for ourselves, because, as I tell people, we are ground zero for the media now. I mean, like, one day, I look out my door and I see two guys walking across my lawn, and I said, well, Penny, I said, you answered the phone, they're selling something. And it ended up being two reporters from the Daily Mail
mm-hmm.
from England
mm-hmm.
looking to interview me about this region. And
Yeah.
I've been interviewed, and other people have been interviewed by reporters from around the world.
Yeah.
And we have to watch the image that we're creating. So I look at it as an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
I could rail against everything, but I don't.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I mean, I think, especially with us this far down the road in the receivership, I think the media, in many instances, have their stories written before they even show up. I mean, they know where they want to take the narrative, because it's a lot more likely to get impressions to come in here and talk about whatever Beirut or the whole is this and that and the other thing than it is to talk about potential and Newport groups that have sprung up to help be supportive of what, you know what I mean? So it's
you're so right, because with the media, which I hate to say it, I love my local media, but national media, but I had a reporter call me up on a different topic, and I said, it was the Washington Post, and I says, you already have your article written, and you don't need me. So he said, what do you mean? I said, I can already tell what you want me to say. And because maybe it's from being a writer most of my life and a former newspaper reporter, I knew that reporter already knew the narrative.
Yeah.
And I didn't need to I didn't need to help them.
No, and to bring your point around, it's the responsibility of all of us to put different narratives out there so that the media can pick up on. I mean, at their core,
Right.
the media wants to get impressions. They want to be able to tell a story that people are interested in. So, our staff has largely been trying to put stories out there about growth, about what we're trying to do up at the mountain, about new employment tactics and retention strategies and attraction strategies up there. So we're trying to put that out there and convince writers and media outlets to maybe talk differently about what's happening. I don't think we're ever going to get away from the reality of that there's a court case happening and things were done wrong, and there's a process to make them right. That's always going to continue, but there has to be some piece of forward-looking event that we all start to attract ourselves to get us through all of this, and that's the growth piece. That's what we all have to look forward to.
The one thing I've always appreciated about Jay, especially my dealings for the last 15 years has been, we don't want to forget our history. Mm-hmm. We don't want to, because sometimes groups come in, like I've even seen people move here, and they try to rewrite our history to make it more palatable to what they want, and I'm not very good at that. I like to write the history, and Bill always told me, Scott, this mountain is not about me. It's about the pioneers, and I know you also feel that way. That the history of the ski area, the history of this area, is really a big part of of the dream up there.
Absolutely. I mean, it's even less about me than than Bill or anybody else. That's for sure. I mean, there's a spirit about the place that the founders of it had, that even the employees today carry quite a bit of that spirit and quite a bit of that spark that they had, and quite a bit of that sort of unmentionable something that the founders and the pioneers had that still continue today up there, that makes the brand and makes the business a lot different than other ski resorts that are in our markets, and that's something that we like to. That's something that's a big part of our story.
You have, it's interesting. You were founded in 56, 55.
Yeah.
One of the pioneers, the only original member of the board of directors, is still alive. Mm-hmm. The beloved Andy Pepin.
Yeah, Mr. Pepin.
He's still alive. He helped with the legal work to get the road up there, to get the mountain going, and
still sharp as hell too, isn't he?
Yeah. Oh yeah. He's a one of a kind.
He is.
But the thing is there, it was founded just by ordinary people. Mm-hmm. And the part that, there's so many facets of your mountain that if people understood its history, which, as you know, I'm actually, now my book on the history of Jay actually goes to the editor here soon, is even the facet that you had a decade after World War II. Here we were in Europe and the Pacific fighting, and then 10 years later you have one of the key players in bringing that mountain forward was Walter Folger, who was a German soldier. He's here helping build this mountain, and he's working with American soldiers,
right.
shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah.
And you see, there's so many facets of your mountain that is so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of what we want to do this summer too is to be able to tell in first-person format the stories of a lot of our employees, and through those stories, I think a lot of that independent spirit is likely to come out, and you'll be able to connect a lot of that to that same spirit that the founders and the pioneers and people like Andy or people like Folger, people like Harold Haynes, those folks. You start to see a lot of similarities between the type of men and the type of people that they were, and the type of people that choose to work at Jay Peak.
Right. And I believe we were talking about the tram and about the construction of the tram. I believe Dwayne Lucier is still with us,
yep.
And he actually went to Austria to help learn how to, get the tram
He
going.
was in a really important part of that as it started to grow, for sure.
Right, and so what more would you like to talk about? We got another few minutes.
Well, I think that all of us are excited about the summer. I mean, as we sit here and talk today, we've got a big 16 team hockey tournament coming in this weekend. 2 or 3 weddings that are happening this weekend. We've got the Vermont Attorney General's Conference up at the mountain right now, which is a couple hundred people. So it's good to get back into the swing of summer. There's always about a month period from when we end to when the summer really starts to heat up in terms of business. And the weather generally turns around and is pretty good. And we're just getting into that period right now. So it's great to see that we have more employees on the payroll at this time of year than we've ever had in our history, which, as we talked about before, our ability to increase the business from May to November and stabilize that time frame in terms of business and profitability allows us to bring more folks on board, which, is really, part of Bill's vision to stabilize our employees and not have those tremendous swings that happen, in September. When you start to bring people on, and then in May when they start to go off the payroll again, because you lose a lot of that institutional knowledge that you've built up with these employees through training. You lose them, they go find different jobs, and then you bring in a new crop of employees, have to train them again. So what Bill wanted to do with a lot of this summer business between May and November is to try to flatten out that curve. And we're starting to get much flatter than we've ever been, and it's our hope that we can continue to go that way.
Do you know right offhand how many employees you have?
Yeah, I mean during the busiest part of our year, we've got about 1,500 employees up there, and we kind of level off at about 700, so about half once we get into the summer. Now 700 as it relates to 1,500 doesn't seem like many employees, but when I first started at this place, we had 88 year-round employees. Yeah, we're at 700 now, so there's a
700 year-round.
700.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk to people out in the Jay area. Even Helen Morris, who's 95, she when she was a young woman, she and her husband operated a horse and buggy school bus route out there. Then they went to van and bus. But she's 95, and she's told me, I've written her history and the history of Jay through her, and she even worked at Jay. Seems like everybody has a connection. She used to work at the top in the what is that called? The Sky House.
Yeah.
And she talks about at the end of the day, sometimes it would be too windy for her to go down the tram, so they'd throw her on some contraption and drag her, ski her down the mountain, and that was when she was a younger woman. But so she worked there.
All the Morrises worked at Jay, as did the Wards, who still work at Jay. First families.
Yeah, well, because if you've lived in Jay long enough, if you're not a Morse, you're probably a sergeant, and if you're not either, you're probably at least somehow married in, because. Like, for example, Helen was a sergeant who grew up in what is the Woodshed Lodge, and then she married a Morse. So they're a very hard, those people are very hard-working people who, they are the face of the historic Jay.
And they still are. And those tentacles of those families still connect up at Jay right now. I mean, we've got generations of employees up there that are still there. And when you work up there every day and you get close to it, you stop realizing what that means sometimes to the foundation of a business like that. I mean, I've worked at enough ski resorts and enough other businesses to know that those foundations of generations of employees who still are there, that doesn't exist at other places, or it doesn't exist at many places. So we try to respect that. We definitely try to celebrate that, because there are a lot of great people and a lot of great families that have been working at Jay Peak an awful long time.
And I think they have a lot to offer your guests too, because I know some people like what I call white picket history, fence history, where it's all roses and everything. Well, those of us who live here, we know better, is the real history of this area does not just involve the beautiful landscape and the white picket fences and the white steepled churches. It involves a far richer sometimes not so pleasant parts of history, but it creates who we are.
Yeah, for sure. There's an authenticity to what our story is, what our shared story is, that's attractive to people. I mean, I think people realize that any town's history, any community's history, is more than just steeples, and the fact that we celebrate that is creates a deeper connection with our guests because they know that we're not, bullshitting.
Right. Well, the one thing is the most fascinating part about your community of Jay is I'm listening in recent days about we're trying to shoot down incoming missiles, and this is on the world stage. So we're practicing shooting down incoming missiles just in case North Korea fired. And I think, hey, Jay was far earlier, because as you know, space research and Gerald Bull in the early days before even President Reagan launched the Star Wars initiative, Dr. Bull and his crew at Space Research were trying to develop the same technology that would shoot down incoming missiles. And we all know what happened to Dr. Bull, who was eventually assassinated by the Israeli Mossad, but that took place in Jay, Vermont.
Yeah, it's beyond the pale. A lot of that stuff, a lot of the stories that come out, you shake your head at and say, how the hell did it happen up here?
But you got to admit, that makes an interesting read for people, because international intrigue, assassination.
I hope there's a big piece of the book on that, so we can everybody can get up to speed on what happened.
It's going to be there.
Good.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts.
Excellent.
It also the book about Jay will also involve just ordinary people like Willie Bell and his wife Viola, who were mountainside hermits.
Yeah.
David Kennett was a man who lived life according to his own terms.
Off the grid, for sure.
But here was a man who didn't have anything financial other than land. When the state wanted to buy land from him to put the road up through, he gave it to him.
Yeah.
And the governor thanked him, and thanks to him, they didn't have to go eminent domain or anything. He just gave them the land and said,
imagine that happening today.
Yeah. Can you imagine Jay Peak happening even today?
Obviously not. Without a route to get to the front door, would have made it difficult.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, we're about ready to wrap up. Any just final words?
I just appreciate the opportunity to come on the show and talk more about it up there, and appreciate the support of everybody over the course of the past year, whether they're locals with a kind word here or there, or the fact that people still continue to come up to the mountain and enjoy what we have up there. Like I said, far and away, much more in the way of support than anything else, and that it helped the spirits of both myself and the staff more than anybody will ever know, and I'll be forever grateful for that.
And I'm going to tell you, and I'll tell the viewers, if you haven't visited Jay Peak, even if you don't like what you hear, if you haven't checked it out, go up there, because you know what is, you might not like what happened, as I don't, but that's a major operation. It's a city. It's a city.
Yeah, lots of good stuff going on.
Let's hope everything works out, because those people, I go up there, they are from around the world. They are here to experience the Northeast Kingdom, whether we like it or not. Jay Peak's there. They're going to stay there. And let's make sure this works and embrace the people who visit, because there's a lot of people there who are willing to spend money.
Yeah, well said.
And so let's be Northeast Kingdom proud, and show them what the Northeast Kingdom is and who we are.
Well said.
All right, thank you for coming on, and
Absolutely.
We'll have to have you back on again.
We'll do, Scott.
And what's the weather forecast for this winter?
We're going to have a big snow winter, like
right.
I say every year in June.
Because I know you must have really impressed your bosses when you were able to pull off such a winter. Your first winter, you were able to pull the strings with the big guy.
Well, we get 2 in a row, we'll really impress them. So.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hey, and thank you for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.